Jim, in your opinion, what's the main difference between performance and health?
There's a great post by Stan Efferding the other day. I love Stan, Vertical Diet. He's where I borrowed or stole the 10-minute walks 3 times a day, which is part of my 5 fundamental habits. He said that health is basically the absence of injury or disease. Fitness or performance is the ability to perform a certain task. And he talked about the level of fitness required to play in the NFL or to be a high level gymnast, Olympic gymnast, or a high level weightlifter is not healthy. And it's so true. Once you start getting into the performance realm, it's not about health. When you're dealing with high level athletes, it's about doing enough to keep them so they can play. But overall, being a high performance athlete, the lifestyle, the travel, the stress, performing at high levels, that's just not conducive with health, bodybuilding, well, no matter what the sport is. So that's why I generally tell people if they want to live a long time, look good and feel good, it's about, flirting with performance, not marrying it.
In this podcast, I chat with Jim Laird, a strength and conditioning coach with over 30 years of experience working at the elite level in many different sports like football, baseball, or golfing. He also loves helping over 40 hardworking folks who just want to live a healthy life and gain their energy back. In this episode, we go over a wide range of topics, including how important sunlight is for your health, why VO2max might not be the best metric to chase, how doing the basics always leads to the best outcomes in health and performance, and much, much more. Thanks to All You Need Nutrition for supporting this podcast. If you don't know All You Need, they are a high-quality supplement brand made in France, designed specifically for those who like to train hard, but who also want to take care of their health. So if you're tired of chugging coffee, check out their one product that provides the essential minerals and vitamins that you might be missing while giving you just enough of a boost to keep going. Use the code UPSIDE to get 10% off of your next order. Now, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Jim Laird. Do you think that the main issue with high performance in sports today is linked to the competition calendar more than the fact of performance itself? What I mean is that if we shrunk the calendar and made it a 2 or 3 months out of the year thing so that the rest of the year you could maybe balance your life out and the stressors and everything that you have to put into it, do you think
Yeah,
that would be
but
interesting?
that would definitely help. Like having a good off season. I think the Russians are probably the smartest with that kind of stuff. They would have, their weightlifters stop lifting weights and play ping pong on the off season, and they would have decompression time, and they were really smart because they didn't have the gene pool of athletes because of World War II, because they lost their entire basically essential, alpha male population. If we're talking just the male side of things, they had to be a lot smarter with their athletic development. Same with a lot of smaller countries. Like, you don't have, an abundance of 7-footers in European countries. So they have to be a lot smarter about their overall athletic development program. That would definitely be a part of it. But whenever you push performance, whether it's a car or a human being, you're gonna have side effects like the number of like fractured spines with gymnasts, carpal tunnel syndrome, um, you know, just that when you drive a car hard, it's going to break more, and you're going to have to fix it more. So that would definitely help. But if you look at like super centenarians, if people live a long time, they're not performance beasts, unless you consider gardening a performance sport. I mean, if it's high performance gardening, maybe, I don't know. But that's basically what you got to decide. Is your main goal health or performance? Somewhere in the middle, I think, is where you want to be. You should be able to, like, if a car comes around the corner, you should be able to sprint out of the crosswalk, avoid getting hit. But you don't need to be doing that like every single day for, 3 or 4 times a day. You just need to have enough capacity to withstand some emergencies. And the body's really amazing at, if it has overall general capacity. Like from what I see here in Nicaragua, these people are doing low-level manual labor all day, every day outside. And I think the low-level manual labor is what's been taken away from our society because we don't have to do anything anymore. And then the getting outside part of it, I think there's massive benefits to being in natural light as opposed to like, fake light, so to speak.
Yeah, we were talking about this just before we recorded. We just moved to France with my family, and we're lucky enough to find a house in the middle of the forest. And I've spent, before we moved, lived in an apartment. I work a lot on the computer, which I don't love, even though it offers me a lot of freedom in what I
Yeah.
do every day. But I had to, I had to fight. I go outside and get my steps in and all that stuff.
Mhm.
Now I get to the end of the day, I'm at 15,000, 17,000 steps, and I didn't even try. It's just because I was
Yeah.
outside half a day
Yeah.
walking around, cutting stuff down. And I've felt a tremendous improvement in my energy levels just by having to do that. That, like you
Yeah.
said, the manual labor, we painted the whole house, we cleaned the whole house. All that was stuff that I hadn't done in a long time. And after 10 hours of manual work, you're actually tired. You go to bed, you sleep, and then you do it again. And then next thing you know, you feel better after 2 or 3 weeks of this, which, seems counterintuitive, but goes back to what you said. Just being physically active for long periods of time is what we're missing. And I talk about sometimes the sedentary athletes. You go to the gym an hour a day, but is that really enough? What do you think?
Well, that's the thing. Like they're building their pyramid on performance, right? So it's like, okay, I go to practice, and then I go to the gym, but then the rest of the time I'm sitting on my ass playing PlayStation or on my phone, right? So they're not getting their sleep. The circadian rhythm is broken. I would say that's a big part of the reason we're seeing so many injuries today is because they're not active during the day as far as just low level manual labor. Uberman came out, if I pronounce that right, with some research this week, showing what Dr. Cruz, people like Dr. Jack Cruz have been saying for decades now, is that natural sunlight, red light, the near and far infrared spectrum of light naturally improve our mitochondrial health and help produce energy. And that decreases as we age, called redox potential. And then artificial LED lights and screens, it basically cause our mitochondria to be less efficient. So it's no surprise to me why so many people are struggling today. Go to ChatGPT, go to Gronk, type in what are the side effects of an indoor sedentary lifestyle under fake lights on human biology. You're going to get a whole list of things that basically are essential for human health that most people are, complaining about: digestion, energy production, hormone issues, low energy, depression, anxiety. It's all related to circadian rhythm and movement. Like your digestion is run, like your microbiome is UV light changes your microbiome. Your vitamin D levels affect your microbiome. Movement affects your microbiome. When's the last time you went to your practitioner or a naturopath even and you said, "Hey, I've got digestive issues, I've got leaky gut," and they said, "Go out and get some light on your belly, get some sunlight. Here, take my probiotic. Here, take this." When the sun drives all that, it sets your gut microbiome. All that stuff is set by sunlight. And so I'm not in the camp where it's only sun. That's why I have the 5 fundamental habits: get outside 3 times a day, at least walk, 10 minutes, protein every meal, lights off at night, high quality water, preferably spring water, and then social connection. If you could live the perfect life, you could live in the forest, in the jungle of Nicaragua, and you could eat the perfect diet. If you don't have any kind of social connection, there are a few people that can do that. Like that one dude that lived in Alaska by himself, in a cabin
Hmm.
for years. He did fine, but I'm not one of those people. You could have the perfect life, low EMF, living under the sun. And if you're miserable, like socially, like if you're depressed because you don't have any social interaction as a human, you're going to be miserable. And then if you look at, there's a study in The Great Cholesterol Myth about a town in Pennsylvania. They drank, they smoked, they worked in mines, but their life expectancy wasn't any less than anyone else because they all went to the bars together. Like, look at English and Irish culture, right? They all go to the bars, they all have a good time, and that's so important for your health. So you can do everything perfect and have no social connection and be in really bad health. It's a balance of everything. So, it's wild, but you just have to understand, if you're going to be a professional athlete, you're going to push hard. There's going to be a price to pay. There's going to be consequences. Just like if you sit on your ass and never do anything, there's going to be consequences. I think the consequences of sitting on your ass and doing nothing are worse than the side effects of being a professional athlete, depending on the sport that you play. And that's what they're doing with all this VO2max.
Mm.
They're comparing like high level athletes with sedentary people.
Mhm.
If we compared high level athletes with people that just do low level activity every day, it would be a totally different animal. Like, you don't want to be sit on your ass and you don't want to do nothing. And you don't want to be like an ultra marathon runner where you have to have your knees replaced at 55, right? Or like John Elway, you can't walk. A lot of these NFL guys can't walk, but they made millions of dollars. So like pick your poison, right? So
Mhm.
I was dumb. I competed in powerlifting when my football career is over, which basically you get a t-shirt for that. So if you can monetize it, maybe a lot of the, maybe being like Ronnie Coleman, he's worth millions of dollars, or Hulk Hogan, just recently died at 72. Like professional wrestlers, football players, they don't generally live to 80 and 90 years old, right? They die younger. So it's just about trade-offs. It's like, what do you want? What are your goals? If you are a performance person, try to make as much money as possible. And you want to be, generally speaking, for most people, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I want to come back on light because that's a topic that my wife has been, she actually used it a lot, just sun exposure in the morning and throughout the day. She used it a lot when she had the really difficult phase with her energy levels. And that's from her perspective, and I would second that. It's definitely what helped her the most is seeing
Yeah.
light early in the morning and just spending more time in the sun. And I started digging into this a little while ago out of interest, and it's funny how people will, go all day into the minutia of biochemistry and energy systems and training and all that stuff. But as soon as it comes to basic physics and the effect of photons on matter, people just lose the plot and don't even want to go into those basic concepts, which
Yep.
it sounds complicated because we made you think in school that physics was complicated. But if you go back today and you just look at the photoelectric effect, what happens between photons and electrons, and the fact that literally light energizes matter. This is actually a fact, and
Yes.
it's not a debated fact. It's a very basic fact of physics, and
Correct.
everything that you said before, the effect of light on mitochondria, the effect of light on us. I mean, without the light, nobody would be on this planet, right? And there's a good reason, in my, at least in my estimation, there's a good reason that every ancient civilization, literally under the sun, every religious system on the planet, at some point or another, consider the sun as being central to the functioning of things. And I don't
The
think
sun,
that's.
the sun and the sun in wilderness, you
Mhm.
know, like look, Jesus, Muhammad, all of them, they all went off into the wilderness all the time to like
Mhm.
focus and regain like things. So, I mean, you're absolutely correct. People don't want to acknowledge the simple fundamental things that are necessary for human health. And they want to look for quick solutions. They want to look for shortcuts. And human biology is human biology and physics is physics. And you can't break the laws of physics for very long without paying a pretty steep price. Nature wins in the end, no matter how fancy we think we are. Um, Anytime I hear that somebody's got the answer to the solution, like I hear people talking about, we've made the exercise pill, you don't have to exercise anymore. There's more things, there's more benefits to exercise than just fat burning because everybody's convinced that being ultra lean is like the healthy thing. I mean, it affects brain development, it affects motor control, digestion. All these things come from good movement, right? And so it's just people do not want to. People kind of scoff at the fact that just getting outside more, getting the lights off at night. Like I have a red light panel that I basically turn on at night so I don't have to turn the overhead lights on. Um, just getting the lights off, getting the screens off after 8 o'clock, um, could be it is the solution for most people. If most people just put the phone down, if most people just got outside throughout the day, if they got more light on their skin, they don't have to bake in the sun all day. They can be in the shade, but natural light versus being in front of a screen in the course of days, years, months. I mean, the side effect is massive over the course of years. And
Mhm.
so it's free, and I think a lot of people don't value things that are free and simple.
Mhm.
Um, it's just kind of human nature, unfortunately.
It's crazy the resistance that people have to those basic concepts. I mean, I was definitely one of them not so long ago, but just
Yeah.
reading about how your body adapts to sun, the way it adapts to exercise. If you start mid-February when you start making vitamin D, at least where I am,
Mhm.
if you start exposing yourself to sun in the middle of the day, and then progressively as it gets hotter, you shift that to the morning, and you
Mhm.
accumulate hours of low intensity light, just like you would accumulate hours of low
Yep.
intensity training. Then when it comes to the high intensity stuff, you can absorb it much better. You can actually assimilate it.
Yep.
You can adapt to it. And it's the same with sunlight. I'm Irish. I would burn every
Yeah.
time I got in the sun, but by just getting in the sun early and accumulating that, now I don't burn. If I
It's
do, it's
great.
because
Yeah.
I was an idiot and I spent 2 hours midday in the baking sun, but that was my problem. But the resistance to people of, oh no, but you go out in the sun without sunscreen, that's dangerous. Yeah, middle of July, middle of the day, like 2 p.m., you're completely desensitized to sun. It's a bad idea. Don't do it because you will burn and that is not good for you. But if you can actually do it step by step and then build it over time, like you said,
Yeah.
do the basics, that it's going to work and it makes a tremendous difference.
Well, it's just follow your intuition. It's like my dogs. They go out and lay in the sun. Like one of them's laying in the sun right now. It's 8:30 in the morning here. And then it'll lay out there until probably 10. And then at 10 o'clock, they'll move into the shade. And then they'll go and lay for 15, 20 minutes in the heat of the day in the sun. And then they come back into the shade. They do that instinctively, intuitively. Um, they just do it. They know. They just know what to do. And we've become so smart. We think we're smarter than nature. And so I use the marathon, running a marathon without training for it all the time.
Hmm.
Like, the Steve Goggins analogy. Basically you can just willpower it. And that's what most people do. They're indoors 90% of the time. They never go outside. When they do, they're wearing sunglasses. They're completely covered, or they slather in sunscreen, which buys them like a false sense of security. So they end up spending more time in the sun because I'm protected by this chemical crap that I put on me. And then they end up getting too much sun midday instead of getting your morning and your evening light, which builds your solar callus, which helps your mitochondria, be more efficient and builds your redox potential, or I would say empties your stress bathtub. And then they just, they spend all week in an office baking under, fake light, which boosts cortisol, which I think is, the blue light, I think is causing a lot of the skin issues and skin aging that we're seeing. I noticed my skin, since I've spent more time outside, particularly in the mornings and the evenings, has is much. I'm 50 years old, and I think my skin looks pretty damn good. Um, and it's just, hey, let's just spend all week in an office, and then we're going to go to the beach and lay there from 11 to 2. We got sunglasses on, which tell our brain it's nighttime, and so your body's not protecting, producing all the things it needs to do to protect its skin. And then we have, no solar callus at all. And then, and it's even Huberman's like, it's really funny because Huberman talked about like how much better natural light is for you
Hmm.
and how much better. And yes, you can get too much sun. I live in Nicaragua. I have to be careful, right? Especially being Caucasian. But it's just common sense. Like, you feel like you're getting too much sun, just get in the shade. Like, it's not anything complicated. But even Huberman's like, make sure you're responsible about your sun exposure, right?
And
But nobody talks about the dangers of LEDs and screens. Like, nobody even mentions it. Like,
yeah,
people are sitting in their underwear watching Netflix at 2 o'clock in the morning. And if you look at the research on cancer and circadian rhythm, like, you could just type in cancer and circadian rhythm. There's one study by Texas A&M where they get into, like, if your circadian rhythm is broken, like, the chances of you getting breast cancer are much, much higher than if it's not, even if you're genetically predisposed to it. So it's the genes load the gun, the environment pulls the trigger. So
that's a good way to
yes.
put it. And back to the sun, again, you can approach it like exercise. So early morning or late at night, you can stay for long periods of time. If I'm in the garden midday, I'll actually have a sweater with me with a
Yeah.
hoodie, and I
Yeah.
will put it on and then take it off for 10 minutes and then put it back on. And then I'll just do my interval in the sun when when the intensity is too high for me to just be there forever.
Now, a
Um,
lot of the locals here will do that intuitively
hmm.
well as well. when you're near the equator, it's like we get up to like 14 UV here sometimes.
That's a lot. Yeah, so definitely do it intelligently, responsibly, but you have to do it, right? It's not about it's
Well,
not.
and I'd say if you build your solar callus and you're wise about your light exposure, particularly the indoor light, I think we've been brainwashed that you shouldn't go out in the sun at all. You're going to instantaneously combust. But for me personally, if I was going to err on the side of caution, I would err on the side of slightly more sun than not enough.
Mm,
I think that if you look at some of the studies on sun avoidance, the risk of sun avoidance, I think, is much higher than the risk of getting slightly too much.
mm,
So that's just me personally, but anything's better than, and that's the thing, like anything's better than what you're doing now. Like I've got plenty of people that are attorneys, doctors that have, people that are indoors all the time. They didn't have to move to El Salvador. They didn't have to move to Costa Rica. They didn't have to move to Nicaragua. They just got outside 3 times a day for 10 minutes and their health improved. And that was their starting point. And they have to decide, okay, well, then they started wearing blue blocking glasses inside. They put a red light in their office, and that's what gave them enough runway to get going in the right direction. And then it's up to individuals to figure out, you complained about having to be in front of the screen a lot. Well, one of the benefits of AI is that you're going to have an assistant that's going to help you create content, which, AI is crazy and there's a lot of danger and I think it's slightly nefarious, but also it allows guys like us that don't want to be in front of the screen to automate a lot of this stuff so that we can still help people and spread the word, but also not destroy our own health at the same time, right? So, and the thing about me with social media, it's like here I am on all these platforms telling people to like go outside and get off the platforms. And of course, that's going to lead to me not being pushed out as much because they want, people to binge watch content. And I'm like, hey, go outside, take a walk, so the key is going to be like, okay, how do you balance both? Because I don't want to be an Amish person,
mm.
right? So the way I do it is like after this call, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to get up. I'm going to move around. I'm going to go get in the sun. In the morning, I block off enough time to get my morning light. I do a little bit of exercise, hit the bag, get on a rebounder, spike my cortisol with my sunlight here. I've got a huge patio. I do all my calls outside, which, helps override a lot of the side effects of being in front of a screen because I can take a little break and I can look off over there into the jungle and I can look at that tree and give my eyes a little rest for a second. So plus I've got all the natural light coming in to kind of offset the side effects of the screen. So you can do simple things like that. You can have a red light on in the background. You can, get rid of some of your LEDs. Incandescents are a lot harder to get these days.
Mm.
Only turn the lights on when you absolutely need it. Obviously, if you're 85 years old and you can barely see, walking around in the dark is probably not a good idea. Falling and breaking a hip is a lot worse than you turning the lights on. But, there's all sorts of ways to kind of hack the system. Obviously, we don't all have to move to the equator and we don't obviously all have to live outside in a loincloth. But if you decide to do that, that's great. If that's what you want to do, and if you have the social network to support that, then knock yourself out. But it's up to all of us to kind of decide. They understand the rules that nature set up, and then making sure you're doing enough of those rules to get the health outcomes that you want.
Yeah, I want to come back to those little snacks of getting outside, moving a bit, getting your sunlight. Another thing that really struck us when we moved here is the lack of light pollution, right? We talked about light, we talked about
Mhm.
sunlight, but the stuff at night, it's crazy how you see satellites in the sky. I'd never seen a satellite flying in the sky. You see dozens every minute. If you actually have no
I
light
know,
pollution,
dude,
there's dozens of
dude.
satellites just going
There's
around.
there's no there's
It's
no light
insane.
pollution here at all
Yeah,
where
it's
I live.
insane.
Even the towns, like they just don't have the infrastructure to have streetlights everywhere.
Right.
And like all the restaurants are outdoors. Like when I was in Kentucky, I used to like post like, hey, it's 75 degrees or 80 degrees. It's just really comfortable. I can't remember what that is Celsius. It's a nice, comfortable day, and there's literally a line out the door for this restaurant or coffee shop, and there's like 10 tables outside, and I was the only person sitting out there. I used to post like, don't be a zoo animal. Well, here, all the restaurants are outside. They don't have AC.
Mm.
You know, you have patios like in Europe too. There's everybody's walking, you know, everybody's like, I've seen people stand in line for 10 minutes to get an indoor table when it's 75, 80 degrees in Kentucky,
Yeah, it's got to
you
be
know?
like 21 to 24 degrees if
Yeah,
I
yeah.
had
Just
to estimate. Yeah.
nice and comfortable.
Mm.
And so you can make these deliberate choices to make, you know, like you park further out in the parking lot, right? So you have to walk a little further to get to your store. Um, you know, it's just I've made these deliberate choices in my life because I know how important. Uh, you know, light is basically the bottom. My pyramid is basically walk outside 3 times a day. That's the bare minimum. I think you need to
Mm.
spend more time than that outside, but that's the minimum. And the to get the lights off at night, the protein, the water, and the social connection. That's the foundation of the pyramid.
Mm.
And then on top of that is moderate activity, and on top of that is intensity,
Mm.
like throwing your intense stuff in there.
Yeah.
And
The-
you don't need to flirt. You know, to flirt with that. Most people are trying to make up for a poor sedentary indoor lifestyle with intensity, and it's not going to end well for most people.
well, it's the same as spending an hour in blazing sun at 2 p.m. when you don't have the callus to actually support it.
Right,
Eventually you're gonna burn yourself, and that's
right,
kind of been my what I've been repeating forever now. It's, maybe right now you're fine, and maybe right now that's working for you, but given just the 10 plus years of experience I have now with all this, at some point you're gonna have to change the way you're doing things, because just doing
right.
the super high intensity stuff only is just not going to work forever, and
Correct.
you have, I want to come back to that's something you said before, that the whole VO2 max thing and the focus on this, and it's the best indicator of longevity and performance. And I do think it's an interesting central concept to kind of bridge the gap between those two worlds of health and fitness. But then what you see the online experts say is that, well, you need to use that protocol because that's the best for your VO2 max and this. But if you actually dig a little bit deeper and listen to people that have been into into endurance sports for decades now, like Dr. Steven Seiler, who's one of the really foremost experts on all things endurance. He actually published a paper, I think it was this year or last year, talking about how there is no magic workout for VO2 max. And if you want the best performance, you just need to train consistently. You need consistency, and sure, you need the hard stuff, but you mostly need consistency. And this is what is going to make you better. It's not that this workout or that protocol, the Norwegian 4x4 or whatever is taunted nowadays online. It's just do the stuff, do it today, do it tomorrow, do it next week. Don't get hurt so you can train next month, and then just do that for years. And guess what? You're probably going to be pretty good.
Why do you think professional athletes hire coaches? It's to do all the boring shit that nobody wants to do.
Yeah.
Most people don't have the discipline to do all the dribble drills with both hands. They have to have a coach to tell them to do it. I'm working with a professional baseball player right now here in Nicaragua. He's a great guy, but he just is addicted to all the intensity. He's addicted to, deadlift, trap bar deadlift jumps and all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, you're strong enough. You're powerful enough. You're playing year-round baseball here. We need to give your spine a rest. It doesn't need to be doing these heavy deadlift jumps every week, even if at all, right? It's like, dude, we need to work on getting you moving a little better. We need to work on developing some other qualities. Like your balance kind of sucks. Like you got to learn how to shut off your stress response. Like he's a very high threshold, high compression guy. And so, but they don't want to do that. And guess what? He's like, oh, wow, my back doesn't hurt as much. I'm feeling better. I'm playing better. I haven't really lost that much explosive power. I'm like, yeah, once you have it, you don't really have to hit that pathway that much anymore.
Mm.
You only have to, strength wise, you really maybe need to, if you've been deadlifting for years, you maybe only need to do it once or twice a month with even 675% to maintain where you're at. And really, how much does a max deadlift have to carry over into baseball? I'd say jumping sideways probably carries over more into baseball than anything. More than vertical jump. I think Cressy talked about that, how the jumping sideways expresses more into like baseball type throwing and batting power than vertical jump or any other marker.
Because there's
So
that rotational like 3 dimension component versus the jump that is a very
yeah,
sagittal kind of dominant.
for pitching and for hitting, it's being able to push, it's be able to throw yourself in one direction, right? So that's very important.
Yeah, it brings to mind a few years ago, I worked with a local rugby team where I grew up and where I played when I was younger, and did some very basic strength and conditioning with them. And we would, and I remember 6 months after I started with them, the forwards coach came to me and he said, "Sean, my props are real explosive right now. They can really get off that first step. What have you done with them?" I said, "Well, every training session, so that's 2 a week plus the game on the weekend. So 3 times a week, we've been doing 10 minutes of power speed drills at the beginning of every single session just to get them moving and get that kind of extensive sprinting-ish motion in place so that they can learn to bounce,
Yep.
they can learn to rebound. And guess what? You do that often enough, you don't need to do it a lot, but if you do it consistently, you will have returns. And guess what? That's going to transfer into your actual sprint. It's going to transfer into your tissue resiliency so you won't get hurt as much. But those are all that, like you said, the boring stuff that nobody
Yep.
wants to do unless a coach tells them to do it.
And you remember, the Parisi warm up? Have you ever heard of that? Parisi, Bill Parisi.
Doesn't ring a bell? Remind me.
So Bill, the Parisi warm up, the guy Bill Parisi, and then like, I think Joe DeFranco came out of the Parisi School of Strength and
Okay.
Speed. I think it was based in New Jersey. Martin Rooney came out of there, and they had this in the late '90s, early 2000s. Jim Windler introduced the Parisi School of Strength and Speed dynamic warm up to me, and it's basically a lot of hopping, single leg hops, pogo jumps, calisthenics, which I was exposed to from Charlie Francis years
Mm.
ago. And then it was basically a ground-based warm-up, like glute bridges, leg swings. But a lot of it was on the ground, which I thought was amazing. And I remember looking at it and I go, this is nothing, right? I mean, this is crazy. So I went through it myself and it absolutely kicked my ass. And I noticed that when we do this consistently with my athletes, everything started getting better. Their running mechanics got better. Their explosive power got better. Their fitness level went up. A lot of their back pain went away because they're getting on the ground. And people kind of confuse like, okay, so strength can fix a lot of things, but many times adding strength can lead to more compensatory strategies, which can lead to more issues. But the biggest thing I think people misunderstand about movement, it's a matter of expansion and contraction, right? So the ability to expand and change shape so you can move, and the ability to compress and exhale so you can propel.
Mm.
Right. This comes from Bill Hartman, the Bill Hartman School of Thought, which I love. Bill, if you ever go watch Bill, just be patient. Bill speaks a different language, and
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
listened to Bill. I've been around Bill enough that I can't repeat what he says, but I kind of understand what he's getting at, and I'm able to take the principles of it. And it's been him teaching me about circumferential expansion, the stack, and being able to stack your rib cage and pelvis, and then being able to shift from one side to the other, and basically we're a giant sack of guts, has been the difference. Like that, when I understood circumferential expansion and the ability to shift and change pressure, that totally changed my entire approach to everything. And my injury rates went down. Everything got better. I was still able to, like, I had girls that liked powerlifting, but I was able to change the programming so they wouldn't get so isolated and stuck. And then we'd do 12 weeks to get ready for a meet. And then we'd do we'd take another 12 weeks or whatever, 24 weeks to do athletic things and different things
In three
to
in
get
three
away
planes of
from,
motion. Yeah.
so they just wouldn't become this one-dimensional, basically robot or tin man, like a lot of guys that have done nothing but lift weights their entire life, turning like me, kind of like I've gotten better, but I'm still, like walking like I'm in a straitjacket. So where was I going with this? Well, I introduced this to my pro baseball team that I was working with. And the unfortunate thing, the way baseball's set up here in Nicaragua is that they play year round, right? So I introduced this low level activity we do every day, and they find it, knee hugs, circles, rocking on your back, push up, walk ups, quadruped rotations, really, single leg group bridge knee hugs and then skips. And then, so we practice, they get Monday off. They practice Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They play a doubleheader, 7 innings Saturday, 2 games, 2 7-inning games Saturday, 2 7-inning games Sunday. Okay. So after the day off on Tuesday, we come in and we do a long warm up, and I get down and do it with them. It's really good for me. And then we would work on we'd get somewhere between. We started slow with maybe 3 or 4. Like these guys had done no speed work at all ever. They just did a lot of long distance running, and so we would get them down in a push up position, do a mountain climber, and then do a 10-yard sprint. Right. We started with 3 or 4 of those, getting them in a good running position after skips and all that kind of stuff. And then we slowly added more volume. And then on, a lot of the days we would play a game, because a lot of these guys need to get competing and they need to compete, So we'd have a bucket and we'd set up balls around the bucket and we'd line them all up. And we'd be like, okay, everybody on the bucket, go. And they would have to race each other and put all the balls in the bucket, stuff like that, right? Or we would do mini soccer games. We'd play soccer games or whatever, just to get them doing something different, right? Dude, the difference we do Monday and Tuesday would be, I'd put 2 back-to-back explosive days together. I'd kind of change, maybe on Tuesday, maybe we would work on running from home or running from home to first to second, right? Or all the way to third. Maybe we do 2 or 3 of them. And then Thursday, it's okay, we're going to do some the whole Charlie Francis high-low thing. We're going to do some strides, and we're just everything Thursday through Friday is just getting them moving, but we're still doing that whole warm-up the whole time, building capacity. And within 2 or 3 weeks, guys, people in the stands were what have you done? And I noticed that with every team I ever worked with. I originally tried this with a high school team in Kentucky, and I think 50% of the team couldn't dunk. And then after 1 month of just we didn't have a weight room, all we added in was it's not exactly the Prezi warm up. I would change it, but it's the same principle. A 10, 15-minute ground-based warm up and pogo jumps and different skips and stuff. The whole team was able to dunk within 4 weeks just by getting them down on the ground and getting them moving and improving the ability to move and just getting their body working better. And so a lot of people overlook this low-level activity, this ground-based stuff, or sled dragging and all that, this boring stuff a lot of people overlook, but that's the foundation of your entire performance pyramid. That's the foundation of your health pyramid, is this boring stuff that you're dealing with every single day, what light you live under, how much stress you're under, how much activity are you getting every day. That's the stuff that's going to matter. You're not going to make up for living an indoor sedentary lifestyle by doing, 3 HIIT workouts a week. You might be able to get away with it for a little while, but eventually when you get older, it's going to catch up with you.
Yeah, I like that parallel between that kind of foundational movement prep that you talked about on the performance side that carries over into the higher levels of performance and a specific discipline, and then the low level activity that we talked about earlier throughout the day that actually feeds you as a human being and is necessary for your health. And back to the performance side, I think it also has an underrated effect on the psychology of the athlete, that especially if they've been training year round, week in and week out, their sport, exactly the same thing, exactly the same movements, and just getting out of this and doing something different, right? So maybe talk about the value of getting outside of your sport from a psychological standpoint as well.
Well, you have to have some sort of relative motion. Obviously, I don't want to make a baseball pitcher normal because he's not going to be able to throw a baseball. But we have to have some sort of athleticism and some sort of relative motion. If we can get people moving in different ways, it doesn't have to be insane. But if we can just pull them, there's a fine line between Bondarchuk would talk about sports specificity versus general GPP. They'd get highly specific for the Olympics. Then they'd go back to more general preparedness and they'd swing back and forth, right? So obviously, if we're peaking for performance, we're going to remove a lot of the high intensity stuff that's, harder GPP and peak. But if you've got people that are playing year round, you can add in some of this general physical preparedness as active recovery. And instead of like running 20 laps to raise fitness and raise capacity, maybe you do a ground-based warm-up where you're
Mm.
doing knee hugs, knee circles, glute bridges, you're doing bear calls, you're doing, side planks, you're doing, side jumps, you're doing, standing and on one foot, you're, doing a hinge where you're doing a cross connect just to get relative motion, getting able to change shape. You're maintaining, if you can maintain enough relative motion to stay healthy, the chances of you staying healthy are a lot better. Obviously, we don't want to make high performers normal because normal's boring. Normal doesn't win medals, but we want to keep them from going so far down the specialization pathway that they blow up. So it's like being on a tightrope. It's like so you can add 10 or 15 minutes of general movement and general dynamic warm up that reduce the risk of driving your car off the road significantly without actually it can increase performance. But obviously, if you do too much of that stuff, it'll actually take away from performance. So there's a fine line there.
Yeah, and it's funny because it works on the movement side, like you just mentioned it. It works on the energetic side as well. If I work with a lot of
Oh,
CrossFitters, and when they never do any low intensity ever because they think, oh no, CrossFit is high intensity, I need to work at high intensity. And because when I started CrossFit, I did that 3 times a week and it worked for me. Now I need to do it 18 times a week and it's going to keep working for me. But once you get to that level and you get to that higher performance, you need to actually change the way you operate, and just adding 15, 20 minutes of easy biking after their hard workouts, do that 3 times a
yeah,
week. And already within 6 weeks, 8 weeks, sometimes a bit longer, but they'd come back and say, I sleep better. My mood is better. I'm like, guess what? Yeah, just you were
yeah,
doing so little before that you didn't need much to actually improve on it. And that's what's great with anything that is quote unquote new, right? Is that the best training is the one you've never done because your body is
yes.
not accommodated to it, and so you're going to adapt pretty fast.
Well, and I think the big thing is when you're dealing with people like CrossFit athletes and you're dealing with people that are hard chargers, I think one of the most important things, that Joel Jameson talks about this all the time, is being able to shut it off, right? And so if you're pushing hard all the time, you got to be able to shut it down, right? And so with CrossFitters, they're using a lot of high compression because they're lifting, they're running, and a lot of them are so toned up they can't shut it off. So getting them to like do a 15-minute crocodile breathing drill at the end. I used to do this to all my young athletes, getting them to shut it down. Like that's such big low-hanging fruit, is getting people to like, set the bar in a Smith machine about halfway or get on some rings, sit in a deep squat, open up and breathe and just get everything, decompressed and start that, that central nervous system shut down. I mean, most CrossFitters are just basically walking around like drinking energy drinks all day because they just want to stay in that, highly, revved up state. And I lived there for a long time. I lived there from the time I was like 25 until I was almost in my mid 30s and when I got ulcerative colitis, because I was the same way. I was constantly pounding energy drinks. It was like, we're going to the grocery store, Pantera, baby, in the car. And like, we're going to listen to Hatebreed on the way to, we're going to like the library and it's like, oh, kill everyone. It's like, and part of that was being on, large amounts of testosterone. But you get to the point where you get addicted to feeling that, this,
Mm.
and you have to learn how to shut that off. And it took me I was forced to. I got ulcerative colitis. I had to learn how to relax. I had to learn how to turn it off. And a lot of athletes lose the ability to switch back and forth. Like, there's nothing wrong with high intensity. There's nothing wrong with compression. It creates a lot of force, but we also need to be able to go the other way. Like Paul Chek talked about, you got to be able to work in so you can work out.
Mm.
And a lot
Yeah.
of people either are on one extreme or the other. They never do anything, which is just as bad for you, and they do too much, which is just as bad for you. So being able to be in the middle and is ultra important. And then understanding your body type and body shape and structure is very important. Like I am Bill called me the widest of the wide. Like my rib cage literally goes like this. Like I am the widest of the wide. There's the infrasternal angle that's like this,
Yeah.
like your Randy Johnsons, your wide receivers, like the tall, lanky. They're really good at turning. They're really good at high speed. And then there's me, like the guy, the juggernaut from the X-Men, who basically just runs through walls. And I have great force production for short distances. I run people over. I smash things. Like that's what I'm good at. Understanding what I'm going to be good at and making sure I don't need to do any more compression stuff. Like I'm a gorilla. I don't need to do anything more to get ultra stronger. I'm dealing with somebody who's a rotator, who's like a Randy Johnson type. Putting a ton of muscle on Randy Johnson is going to take away his superpower. I don't know if you know who Randy Johnson is. He was a baseball pitcher
Mm.
in the majors, one of the best. Whereas like Roger Clemens was more of like a truck like me. And then understanding that Randy Johnson, if you turn Randy Johnson, you try and make him like a big jacked up dude, it's going to take away from his ability to throw, because his ability to throw comes from his ability to rotate. Right.
Yeah, so
So
you have to
Ben Johnson versus Usain Bolt, right?
you have
So
to respect what you are to begin with, what your makeup is, but you also
right.
have to balance it out with the other side of the spectrum, right? And back to being able to shut off. I've been lucky to work with Claudia Gluck, who's the number one French CrossFitter right now. She qualified for her second games. I'm going to Albany in a couple days to see her this year, and that's one thing that she's really evolved in over the last, I'd say, 3 years now. She was incapable of taking, proper rest after her competitions before. We had to fight with her, me and the other coaches that work with her. We had to fight with her for her to actually take a few days off after a big competition. And now that's probably one of her strong suits. Is she's excited about the transition phase after her competition. She knows that the games are coming up next week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's pretty short this year. But then for 3 weeks to a month, she doesn't have to think about CrossFit. She's going to be on the beach. She's going to see her friends, her family. She's going to
Yeah.
read books all day. And I think that's a superpower as well when you're talking about, elite performances, is knowing when to turn it off, because that's going to allow her to, stay healthy and do another crazy season next year and perform at the highest level she can. And not only this, but again, while trying to be as healthy as possible in the long run, because you
Sure.
you can do it for a period, but eventually it's gonna bite you in the ass. But if you
Yeah.
can find that balance, she takes about 8 weeks off a year. Who in their right mind takes 2 months off every year? It's a lot of time for a professional athlete, but I think that's one of the things that allows her to keep that pace year in and year out,
Yeah.
and also not compromise her health in that.
Well, I'm sure she's not just sitting around on her butt. I'm sure she's doing stuff. And it's not like you just sit on your couch and eat Doritos. It's just the competition and the constantly being coached and the constantly pushing for PRs. And the Russians figured this out long ago
Mhm.
with the mental break that you need to have. You need to have a mental break, an emotional break, because it's just so hard on you. That's why all professional sports have an off season, and it's getting shorter and shorter all the time. But being able to step away and do some other things and relax and mentally get yourself ready for the next year, and let your body kind of normalize so you can push it hard again, bring it back towards center is super important. And you just can't crank it hard all the time. You got to have some downtime from time to time.
Besides what you've already spoken about, what are some other strategies that you use when there are very dense and very long seasons of competition to help
Mhm.
athletes try to find that balance?
Well, it's the sleep. Like I'm dealing with that here in Nicaragua. It's like they play literally year round with no break. And so how do you improve performance without wrecking a lot of these guys when you have to work within the system? And so like that's where like, okay, looking at what their biggest weaknesses are. Okay, a lot of them it's like they just don't move well. Okay, so we can do low level activity to improve their ability to move. Maybe I have some guys we need to raise their ability to express force. Okay, so we're going to do that with an Aerodyne bike instead of like having them jump and maybe we can't do as many sprints. Maybe we get them in the pool and maybe we have them do some pool workouts, like individually picking out like what the person needs the most, the biggest low hanging fruit. And most of these guys here, it's about sleep, it's about getting outside, even though it's about like just going and laying in a hammock and relaxing. A lot of it is nutrition here because their nutrition is, they're not eating enough protein. This protein's very expensive. So just simple stuff, but a lot of it is like, okay, what are the big holes in their general overall fitness? And most of them, they're GPP. The older guys that have played a long time, they haven't they haven't really done enough of like the low level activity. And maybe they need a little bit of strength training, but nothing crazy. It's hard to really develop high levels of strength during the season when you're playing year round. So, but the good news is just a little bit, particularly when you're a beginner, goes a long way. I think I think people think you have to do these radical interventions to make people get better. And it's just most of the time, that's not the case.
Mm.
A lot of, especially with beginners or untrained people, it's like the best thing in the world. And then once you reach to a point where performance is fairly high, then it's like, okay, how do we not screw it up? Like, right. Like that's like how do we keep the athlete from getting in their own way? Because a lot of times it's like they don't know when to leave the field. Most of the athletes that I had in the US were, a lot of them were baseball players that loved powerlifting too much. They loved benching and they loved deadlifting heavy, and it was affecting their ability to throw.
Mm.
Or, I had a high level Division I soccer player, very good soccer player, but she had herself convinced that triathletes and powerlifting was the way to train for being a soccer goalie, and her back hurt all the time and she couldn't play soccer. Or I had a pole vaulter who would train so much that the skin on her hands would rip off. And I'm like, if the skin on your hands rip off, like you can't pole vault. So, that's the kind of a client I've attracted over the years.
Mm.
Most of the clients I've had were ones that were doing too much and they were breaking themselves. And then you've got the opposite end of the spectrum. I think one of the big problems today with the fitness industry is you look at Instagram, you look at all these people that are running around ripped and shredded and doing all these crazy things to get views. And the guy that's sitting on the couch looks at that and goes, that's what it takes to be healthy. Like I have to literally eat nothing but, I've got to eat, this and that. And I've got to do these extreme things. And then I've got to be on these peptides and supplements. And then I've got to train like a maniac and like on the verge of throwing up all the time. And they look at it and they're like, man, the couch is much safer. I'm just going to sit on the couch and watch my video games and do whatever. If people knew that it wasn't that, in order to get better, just to get better and to go in the right direction, you don't have to be like exercising constantly. You don't have to do anything extreme. It's just to look good and feel good. It's really not that hard to do. And I think people look at the stuff online and think that's what they need to do to be healthy. And it's the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah, and like you said, it probably stops a lot of people from even starting because they're comparing themselves to that highest level that you see, and you
Right.
think, well, I can never do that, and that's too much. And so, like you said, it's easier to do nothing than to start by going out 3 times a day, walking a little bit, which they're not doing and would be beneficial, right? Because
Right.
and that's I think that's probably one of the it seems so obvious when we talk about it, but I hadn't thought about it that way until recently. There's no absolutes, right? People ask, "Oh, how many cardio sessions should I do a week to improve my cardio?" There is no number. It's about look at what you're doing now. Write down what you
Right.
did last week, every day of the week. This is your template. This is what you start with. Now, did you do 0 minutes of walking last week? Well, how about we walk half an hour a day in 10-minute chunks, like you said? That's
Yeah.
already going to be
And
better
yeah.
than what you
And
did
then you
before.
have, I have the ladies like, well, I can't walk 10 minutes because my back hurts. Well, you start with 6, right? And like you see where you're at and you're like, well, I added this and my performance went down or my sleep went down or whatever. Well, and sometimes, with high level athletes, you might want to beat people up a little bit for super compensation, but that's a totally different story. But on the health side of things, if you look at like the 1970s compared to now, people now, like we've created a culture and a society that basically destroys human health by taking you and making you live an indoor sedentary lifestyle. And it happened to the Romans, not at the extreme, but their health went to hell. They became so successful, they outsourced everything. They just basically sat around and drank wine and had orgies all day. And it destroyed their culture and destroyed their health, essentially, right? So we have to decide, like, okay, how am I going to set up my life so that I'm spending enough time outside, I'm getting enough manual labor, I'm getting enough movement to be a healthy human? but still, okay, I can use the computer as a tool to make revenue or to stay in touch with people. Like, where do I find that fine line? Because 1940, 1950, 60, even the 70s, there's three channels on the TV. Like you didn't, and the TV like it stopped working at like 11 o'clock. It had those bars on there and said, "Go to bed, you jackass." Right? Um, you mowed your grass. You did manual things. Women cooked their food. There wasn't DoorDash. There wasn't Uber Eats. There wasn't, like people spent more time outside. They went to the beach, right? They didn't have the screens and the video games to make sure you didn't go outside. So life itself set you up for health, right? And that's why the obesity rates were next to zero in the 70s. And then it just kind of got worse as people moved more indoors. The problem is now is our indoor sedentary lifestyle addicted to screens is set up to make you feel terrible and have horrible health outcomes. And then everybody's selling you a peptide and this and a supplement and all that stuff, which is great. You might take a peptide, you might take a supplement, and you might see some improvement for a while, but then 8 weeks, a year, 6 months goes by, you haven't fixed the foundation, and you're using tools to build your foundation, and then you lose therapeutic runway. It stops working, or it becomes a stressor. How many people that I've seen on thousands of dollars worth of supplements, and we pull them off them, they do much better because their system's overwhelmed, right? So what has to happen is you have to decide how you want your life to look and how you're going to basically improve your overall health, mental health, and well-being. And I think the 5 fundamentals is where you start. And then you have to decide, okay, how much, you don't have to be an Amish person, but then again, sitting in an office from 8 in the morning till 6 at night in front of a screen is probably not good either. So you have to figure out what works best for you. And you didn't have a choice 1940, 1950, 1960. You spent time outside. You went outside, you went to church, you interacted with other people. Now everything's drawing you to the screen, everything's drawing you and making you a complacent, compliant consumer that just buys shit on the internet all day. So you kind of have to decide how you want to set up your life and what you want to do.
Yeah, the biggest shift I felt was when I went from coaching in person and I was doing, between probably 5 and 7 hours of coaching a day. And plus it was during COVID when we go back to Switzerland. So I actually had my indoor rower in the car and I would drive from client to client, pull out the rower, set up the thing,
Yeah.
do the session, move again. So I was on my feet all day. And then I started doing the online courses, the online programming, and all that stuff. And I love it. It's great. But I became sedentary and I didn't realize it. I didn't think about it. And a year later, I kind of fell apart. I had no energy. I had no motivation. I didn't want to go to
Yeah.
work. I love giving seminars, spending time with people. I didn't want to go and do it anymore because I had just sat inside. And that was a huge wake up moment for me. A couple years ago, and my wife helped me a lot because she had gone through something similar a couple years prior. She said, "You know what, Sean? Let's cancel whatever you have on your calendar for the beginning of next year. Let's focus on just finding ourselves again, spending time together, going for a walk every
Yeah.
morning with the dog." And that has a huge impact. And back to the light, I hadn't noticed the impact of indoor lights because we were at home and we had our own lights. I went to give And that happened twice in like 2 months. I went to give a course and it was a low ceiling, LED lights, closed windows, and came 2 p.m. I was dizzy. Like my head hurt. I never get
Yeah.
headaches. And I didn't realize it. I actually wrote to my friend who has the facility after the course. I said, it went great. The students were great, but I think you could probably improve the learning environment by changing the lights. And she said, yeah, it's not really a priority right now. She hadn't really spent any time in that room. A month ago, she had to give a whole 2-day course in that same room. She messaged me after. She said, could you send me some of those resources about light again? Because she had a massive
Yeah.
headache as well. It's crazy when
Yeah.
you don't think about it and you're in it all day. You don't think about it, but if you can step out and then step back in, it's incredible the effect that it has.
When I first got sick, and I learned about all this stuff, or when I ended up, I basically was spending 5 in the morning till 8 at night inside in the gym. And then anytime I went outside, I had sunglasses on. And well, I remember when I took the sunglasses off and I started getting more natural sunlight, my eyes would water. Now, if I go indoors to like I go to Managua and I go to Walmart and I walk inside, my eyes water like they used to water when I was out in the sun because I'm just not used to the indoor lights anymore. So it's interesting. It's a very wild time to be alive as a human. We've got all this AI stuff coming online. I agree. I'm coaching here in Nicaragua and I'm losing money as I coach because I could be making a lot more money working virtually. But going and getting outside and, even most of the gyms here are outdoor gyms because they don't have it's so expensive to use air conditioning here. Um, so you're actually getting natural light most of the time when you go to the gym. So just getting outside and moving around just made such a huge difference. I love helping people. But me working outside and getting and moving around is such a huge part of being healthy. And I don't think most people realize that. And so, if you are watching this and you're like either you're a performance junkie and you've burned yourself out, or if you happen to be watching this and you're in a bad place, low level to moderate activity every single day and starting with those basics, whether you're burned out or you're basically not doing anything, both are the key. For the key to most people is adding more low level activity and then getting your light environment in order.
Mhm. I wanted to come back to one of your five pillars, the protein intake.
Mhm.
And you talked about how it's expensive where you are, so obviously it's harder for people to get
Well,
to.
it's expensive for local people. It's not expensive for me. It's super
Right,
cheap for
right.
me. You can buy a tomahawk ribeye here for $15 US.
Yeah,
But
it's
the average income here is $200 a month US.
yeah, no, it's true when you start to change locality. I mean, it's the same for us moving from Switzerland to France. We would pay 23 Swiss francs for 30 eggs at the farm, and here at the
Hmm.
market we can get this 30 eggs for 6 euros.
Yeah.
Which is insane. And but going back to the protein intake, what are some of the strategies that you're putting in place so that they can increase their protein intake, even though it's expensive, and that could probably help people regardless of where they are, right?
Or for here, it's just more eggs because eggs are really
Mm,
cheap here. Chicken is fairly reasonable here. It's the carne, it's the beef that's really expensive.
yeah,
And then I just tell them, I'm like, okay, instead of having, they do drink a lot of beer here. Tonya, it's a dollar. It's about $1 US a beer. So beer is a lot of like, hey, cut back on your beer a little bit, eat a little more protein. Um, but in general, people that I work with, Western folks, like women in particular, I just tell them, hey, like add some Applegate Farms turkey breast or chicken breast at each meal. Have an extra egg, just slowly, hard boil some eggs, have them as a snack. Maybe add a couple whites. Have two yolks, two eggs, and add a few whites to your omelet. Have chicken sausage, things like that are leaner. A lot of people think bacon's got a lot of protein in it. It's got a lot of fat. It's really yummy, but it doesn't have a lot of protein. So just stuff like that. And then, I'm not a huge fan of protein shakes, but adding protein shakes after workout is a great way to get more protein. But most people they can get close to 1 gram unless they're training ultra hard. Most people just, if you're a 130, 140 pound woman, if you're getting close to 100 grams of protein, that's going to take care of your issues, especially if you have a good, getting outside, your circadian rhythm isn't broken, all that stuff.
mm,
But it helps so much with satiety and just getting the neurotransmitters that you need. The combination of all of it together is really where the magic is.
the It's interesting the red meat thing you mentioned made me think of a few years back when we lived in Canada still with my wife. She had some energy issues, health issues, and so she kind of ran the gamut of all the different diets that you can do. And
Yeah, yeah.
eventually she got to the carnivore diet, and so I did it with her for I think for 3 months we did it, and we only ate animal protein, and one of the first and foremost, and I'm not saying people should eat like this because I think there's many different ways of approaching nutrition, and I mean, as a case in point, my wife herself, 2 years prior to us doing the carnivore diet, she was highly sensitive to beef. She would get a headache anytime she ate beef, and when
Mhm.
she did a blood test, and beef was the most reactive element on her test. And 2 years later, she ate almost only this for 3 months and did the best that she's kind of ever felt. So I think we have to really consider nutrition on an individual level and at a point in time, because your microbiome changes, everything can change pretty quickly. But
Sure.
one of the things that really stood out was how superior, if I may say, red meat feels when you only eat meat. It's a bit like when Jordan Peterson talks about you only drink bubbly water. You know that there's
Hmm.
like shades of bubbly water and some that are actually better than others. And
Sure.
it really stood out. Could you talk a little bit about this? And is there for you a hierarchy of protein sources for
Well,
or not?
I mean, obviously, I think, red meat because it has creatine, because it's got so many nutrients in it. If I was in nature and I had to survive, the first thing I'm going to find is an animal source, right? Um, I think eating seasonally really makes the most sense if longevity is your number one goal. So
Why is that
eating with
important?
this, well, because it matches up with the light environment, right? So uh, your system, you get into like and I'm not very good at explaining this, but you get into like the electrons and the physics of stuff. um, you need to eat to match what environment you're in. Like, so, obviously the human body is very resilient and can get away with a lot of things, but even like the Eskimos, right? They aren't truly carnivore. They eat a ton of berries in the summer. Like when there's berries, they hammer them things. And then even their pemmican and stuff, they put berries in their pemmican in the wintertime. So, but they're living in a very cold, dark environment and they're eating plenty of fatty fish. So that's where your keto comes from, essentially. And what kind of comes down to is like, if you're getting benefit from a keto diet, it comes from protons, electrons, the whole transport chain, what it's doing to your mitochondria, right? And that's why I think it's important I think if you're going to do a lower carb diet, I think doing it in the wintertime, if you live in a northern climate, keto here doesn't really make any sense. Paul Cilandino tried to do keto here in Costa Rica, and he's like, I almost died. Because you need the fruits, you need the pineapples, you need the pina, you need the cantaloupe, you need all that, like, so I think eating that's generally how people have evolved is they eat what's in their environment, right?
Well, we had to until we had all the
Yeah,
logistical chains of being able to buy a banana from the other side of the world and buying
correct. And
an
and that's
avocado
where
out of season and all
yeah,
that.
yeah. And that's where Jack Cruz caused all sorts of controversy talking about you're stupid if you eat a banana in like Boston in December, which, I can't really necessarily say that I mean, can you eat bananas in December in Boston? Sure. And your body's very resilient, but I do think it's wise to match. Like, I think eating seasonally is probably the best thing you can do. In the wintertime, more root vegetables, things that you canned maybe. Definitely not eating, like if you're in like Ireland or something, eating pineapples in the middle of December. Can you do it? Sure. But I think eating seasonally is the best. And I've seen every type. I've seen people do really well on a vegetarian diet for a few months, and then it goes to hell. I've seen people do, carnivore keto. It does well for a little while, and they do great. And then, so I've seen all sorts of, now the sugar diet's the big thing, right? Um, what are people going to sustainably do over time? Because we are in the luxury now. I think having a lot of choices is the worst thing that's ever happened to people, right?
Mm.
So we've got all this information online. There's not a lot of choice. There's tons of choices. People get paralysis by analysis by switching programs every 3 weeks. They're not looking at principles. They're looking at they're going after emotions. Like this program promises me like quick results. Now you go into a grocery store, there's so many choices. When you only have like I'm here, like if I only have the choice between eggs, beef, chicken, pineapples, and mangoes and avocados, because that's what's in season right now.
That's what
I'm
you
only
eat.
if I yeah, I mean like yeah, it's like literally what's in season right now is avocados, mango, pineapple, and bananas are in season right now. And there's a time where those are out of season here. But there's always plants available. There's always rice available. People grow rice here all the time. So it's just I think if you look at like super centenarians, what do they all have in common? They all eat what's in their local environment.
Yeah, I think
And,
seasonally
it,
and
and it's su-
locally.
it yeah, it's super convenient to have things from around the world and stuff. And of course, that happened, thousands of years ago. People brought apples from, on ships and stuff, but not as prevalent as it is today. Like you can have fresh whatever shipped to you.
Yeah, you'd have it once, and you could say, "In my lifetime, I had an apple from the other side of the world," and that was that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
about
yeah.
it.
And I don't think like I think the emotional. I think if you're stressed out about, oh my God, should I eat this sweet potato? Like, like if you're sitting there and you have like a sweet potato and meat and it's the middle of like January. Although I think root vegetables are reasonable because you could put root vegetables in a cellar. And a lot of people in the past have eaten root
Mm.
vegetables year round. So if you start like with anything, whether it's Wi-Fi or EMF or whatever, if you hyper focus and you make it a bigger deal than it is, I'm just saying for me, I focus on my circadian rhythm. I focus on being active, and then I eat 80% of the time. I eat really well, but probably eat more carbs here than I have in my entire life because I'm living near the equator. Like that's what's available, and that's what you crave. Like if you're living near the equator and you're working out and you're sweating and you see mangoes, trust me, you're going to go attack the mangoes. Like you just like Paul Salandino, the carnivore guy. He's like, I'm carnivore and I eat fruit now because you can't live an active lifestyle in Costa Rica and only eat meat. Like it's not going to happen.
And back to what
But
you said, seasonally and locally, if if you care about the environment, that's also probably the best thing that you can do, right? Is reduce the
correct.
reduce the distance that the food you consume is going to travel, actually connect back with local
Right.
producers. We did that yesterday. We got in touch with a few local producers for beef, for chicken, trying to find
Yeah.
different sources that are local, as in like next door, and trying to close the circle, because that's probably one of the best actions you can take, right, on a grand scale. Everybody wants to change the world, but it starts with your behavior and starts with
Correct.
your closest environment, your behavior every day. And if you can reduce the amount of kilometers that your food travels to get to you, well, guess what? That's going to have a considerable impact on the
Sure.
environment and, like you said, on your health as well.
Absolutely. I think the big key, like I've met tons of, I spent a lot of time with super centenarians, and none of them stressed out about stuff like that. They're very easygoing. It was like I garden. A couple of them drank. One of them, I met one guy who was 108. He chewed tobacco since he was like 14. I mean, he was missing half of his jaw, but he was still alive. A lot of them smoked cigars. A lot of them drank alcohol. I just don't think they stressed about anything. They're just like, well, this is why I enjoy this and I'm going to do this or whatever. And so I think a lot of times with the information we have, we get hyper focused. Like people learn like, oh, I should eat seasonally. And then they go out to a nice dinner and they're like, oh my God, I'm not going to have these scalloped potatoes because they're not in season. And they create more stress over that. Or like, they go stay in a really nice hotel and they're worried about, all the Wi-Fi routers and stuff. Some of the best sleep I've had since I moved to Nicaragua is like on the like fifth floor of a five-star hotel in Managa that has really good air conditioning. I was getting blasted by, Wi-Fi routers, but because I had air conditioning, my sleep was way better. And everybody wants to have this exact formula for health, and there's so many factors. All you can do is pick the low-hanging fruit and then just experiment and see kind of what's going on. But I think this paralysis by analysis and the over information, I think getting more in line with nature is important. But on the other side, like if I tried to sleep outside here in the jungle, like I'd be miserable, like getting bitten by all the bugs, and like I don't have the ability to like live like the natives used to here.
Mm.
So there's got to be a fine line between the two, right?
Yeah.
And because I don't want to live like an Amish person, and then again, I don't want to live on the like the 20th floor of a skyscraper either. So I want to be somewhere in the middle, and I think that's where, unfortunately, that doesn't sell any products, and it doesn't get people excited. It's not going to make me a multimillionaire or anything like that. But I just talk about learning from some of the dumb shit that I've done to myself. And generally people tend to chase extremes, and the answer is usually somewhere in the middle.
Another one of your pillars is social connection. And
Yes.
how do you work with your coaching clients? How do you get them to spend more time with their close ones, get out of their bubble? I think for me and for us with my wife, I think COVID was a turning point in that we stopped reaching out to go out with friends, see friends,
Yeah.
and I think our social life really took a hit from
Yes.
that. So, what are some of your advice regarding that?
Well, checking into like groups and hobbies, like I have a lot of, and I think part of the problem today is that people are so polarized. Like it used to be, I could hang out with people that were on the complete opposite of the political spectrum. And I'm not even a big politics person. I'm more of a libertarian, so I'm like in the middle and I piss both sides off. But I think one of the problems today is that people just can't disagree without having for it getting personal. Like I
Mm,
remember having friends that I totally disagreed with on just about everything, but we were cool. It was like, okay, that's your opinion, that's my opinion.
mm,
I didn't have any like desire or need to change their opinion, and they didn't really have a desire or need for me to change my opinion. And we are just like, okay, that's the way you think, and you treat me well, and I treat you well. That's cool. So I think with the current political climate and the way things kind of are, has made it harder for people to be in groups and to have relationships. I think the technology, I
mm,
think putting that down, I think making just deliberate choices to in the Western world, like one of the things I like about Nicaragua, one of the reasons I like being here, the families all live together still. Like that's how they afford. Like they all live in one house. Like there's several generations in there. So like they look at me, who I'm single, I live by myself. They're like, "You moved here by yourself?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, they just can't even comprehend that.
mm.
And I think that's part of the West's biggest weakness is like, okay, the kids like they grow up and they move halfway across the country. Never happened before. People stayed in their little groups, right? So that I
Mm.
think that's one of the negatives today of our modern world, and we have to make deliberate choices to like have social connection. Like married guys, that happens a lot in my men's group. Guys get married, they give up all their friends, all of a sudden they don't have any male friends anymore, and then their relationship doesn't work out, and they're as women keep their relationships generally, and so the poor dude is blindsided and in a horrible place because he hasn't have any social connection. So we talk a lot about, hey, like volunteering, finding, either church groups, religious organizations, charities, whatever to spend time with, reaching out to people via, social media, but then also having in-person meetings with them. I think the challenge becomes is when you have people like myself that don't have kids and family, particularly women that don't have kids and family, it becomes really difficult because then at least if you have kids and family, you can go hang out with another
Mm.
group of people that have kids and family, and that's really easy. I think that makes it difficult. I think there's going to be a whole bunch of women that are really going to be struggling because they don't have kids and family. They're going to have a hard time fitting in.
Mm. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
It's just the kind of how our culture's gone. Like our culture is just, really emphasize career and really emphasize stuff. Whereas here, they're emphasizing women get an education and women get a career. But I mean, we've got a statue of a woman breastfeeding at the entrance of the town over here in Diria. It's called Diria. They have a statue of a woman breastfeeding. It's like the most important thing a woman can do is be a mother.
Mm.
Like, can you imagine if you put that up in the United States? There'd be like pitchforks and like there'd be
Tear down
people.
the
"Oh, how
statue.
how dare you oppress me? So it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
some what women have, I guess you could be designed or have evolved to do, burn me upside down at the stake. Women are essentially that their role is to have children. Well,
Yeah, it's
burn me
definitely not
upside down.
ours.
That's definitely not
We're
mine.
not we're
That's
not
for
built for
sure.
that shit.
No, and so our culture has like totally just taken a massive whatever on that, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's part of the problem is like we're going against nature, and it doesn't really end well. Whereas here, there's still like women are becoming nurses and doctors and stuff, but they're still like, hey, sure, you want to chase a career, but really the family is the most important still, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's like last night I did an Instagram live because I went to they have a park in the middle of every town here in Nicaragua. They call it Park Central. They had a big soccer game going. The kids were playing on the playground. They had some festival that all the women were dressed up in like traditional Nicaraguan garb and they were dancing. And it's just very family oriented here. Like family is like the center of everything. It's
Mm.
not perfect. No country's perfect, but compared to the Western civilization where families kind of like become like an annoyance, um, it's very refreshing.
Yeah, and going back to what you said, seeing people in person, I think a lot of the polarization has to do with I like to call it anti-social media because it's not social at all. It just pushes us to the edges and
Yeah.
boxes us down into our own little echo chamber. And actually meeting someone in person and talking to them face to face, you wouldn't say a third of what you would say to them online, just be with people, have conversations, like you said, have disagreement. I think
Right.
being able to disagree with someone is actually a quality nowadays. Disagree with them and then not hate them the next second.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not personal. Well,
no.
I remember before I left the States, when I left the States, in a year and a half. I remember one of the last days in the US, I was in Tampa. I think it was at a Chipotle or I don't know where I was, but I remember seeing a group of kids just like this sitting around a table. There's like 14 of them or 15 of them, and they're all sitting on their phones, texting each other on the phone. And so it's pretty wild. Like it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years with all the technology and everything that's coming out. I mean, just wait when they start. They've already got the AI computer glasses and stuff. It's like you're just going to have to make some choices of like what kind of world do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a world where you're basically hooked up to a computer and you got a chip in your brain, or you don't want to live in a world like that? I mean, that's where it's going really
Mm.
quickly.
Yeah, and it's what's interesting
So,
is we still have the choice to go back in time by changing zip code. And that's something we realized, and I'm sure it was the same for you moving
oh,
from Florida to where you are, and it's the same with us moving from a town with, 25,000 people, which isn't even a big city, but it's grown massively since I was a kid. It's where I grew up in Switzerland to where we are now, which there's literally 12 houses in the little place in the forest where we are, and the village that we're attached to, because we're not even a village, as less than 500 people. And you go to the market, and I connected with some of them before we went down there online, and they said, "Yeah, we just got on Facebook." It's like there's been the
yeah,
Facebook, the Instagram, the
yeah,
TikTok,
yeah,
the
yeah.
this went back and forth, and they just got to Facebook. So it's like we went back 10, 15 years in the past. And it's the same with the social connections. There's the market every Sunday or every Saturday, and everybody's there having a drink and having a laugh, and there's music and everybody's hanging out. And it's yeah, sure, there's also the market where we lived in Switzerland, but the energy is not the same. And like you said, people are on their phones, and here it's almost like a different world. It's crazy to
Yeah.
see.
I would compare Nicaragua, where I live, to the United States in the 1970s or 1980s.
Right.
Um, you go to Managua, then it's like mid 80s, early 90s with more internet. Like obviously we have the internet, but just where things are and the attitude of people, it's kind of cool actually. And like where I was living before, it was 45 minutes to the nearest ATM, which was a little too much for me. Now I can literally walk 15 minutes and be at an ATM, or I
Mm,
can hop on my motorcycle and be there in 5 minutes. And then I have access to malls and things like that within a half an hour,
mm,
20 minutes.
mm.
So for me, that's the balance. I've got my little outdoor area here that's about 5 minutes from town. It's peaceful. I don't have to live totally isolated. Before I was like way off the grid. That was too much for me. You have to kind of decide what works best for you. But the more of the five fundamentals you can do, the better chance you're going to have for long-term success. And then just like if you're going to chase performance or chase extremes, just make sure that you do the work you need to do to shut it off, because you know, being able to push hard is nothing wrong with that, but you have to be able to shut it off as well. You have to have light and dark, and a lot of people get caught in the pushing harder more. And then most people don't want to do the low to mid-level work to basically have the foundation for high level performance. And that's the big problem is play. Kids don't play outside, and that's where you build the low level performance foundation for high performance, right? And that's basically, it made me really mad. Like, I love a lot of these people online that are trying to help people, but well, not that I'm perfect either, but they were talking about bone density in children, like all kids need to strength train and they need to like Peter Attia was like, they need to strength train and go rucking. I'm like, dude, like really? They need to put the phone down. They're being handed a phone at 1, right?
Yeah.
And they're not going outside and they're not getting any sun and they're not playing. They're not climbing trees. They're not jumping off picnic tables. That's why we have a bone density issue with children, because they don't go outside and they don't play.
Yeah.
It's rucking at 15 or 16. And like, how many kids that grow up in front of a PlayStation or a phone are going to magically flip the switch at 16 and be like, I'm going to start lifting weights and I'm going to go rucking? Really?
Yeah.
Like, let's talk about the 7,000-pound gorilla in the room, is the fact that we hand a child at 1 a screen, and it's happening here in Nicaragua. And they're just like this the whole time, locked on it because it's highly addictive and their brain isn't developed yet.
Yeah,
that's the root cause of all the problems, right? And nobody wants to say, like, it's child abuse to hand your child a screen. People don't understand that play is the foundation of all mammalian development. The brain, the hormonal system, the ability to regulate yourself, the ability to deal with conflict, all these things, human interaction, all comes through play. So what happens when you basically put a kid in front of a screen at 1 and then you send them to school and they don't play in school and they just start rote learning? You end up with this kid who's like extremely anxious, all sorts, every problem in the book. They never go outside. It's all the problems we're talking about today.
Yeah, and I think it starts with us, right? It starts with the parents. I mean, this morning we said, okay, it's going to rain this afternoon. Let's go outside. So our teenage boy helped me build the garden bed. And then he essentially did 2 hours of landscaping because we have to move some tiles around outside. And he was like, so do I have to do my biking session today? I said, you spend 3 hours outside in the sun doing landscaping. We're good. Like, this is your activity for the day. I'm happy with you not sitting on the bike. And then the little guy, he's building a fort in the bushes.
Yeah.
So he cut some trees down with us and he figured out how to make a few knots. And, I think, like you said, we got to get outside. I think that's, for me, the biggest message. And it is a choice, right? We have to make that a conscious decision. And there's always going to be lots of reasons not to do it. And it's always going to be easier to sit inside and not go outside because it's too hot or it's too cold or it's not convenient. Or it takes work. But again, everything that's worth something takes work, including going outside, moving your body, seeing the sun. And this is probably like you said, the most fundamental things that are the most accessible to everybody, but that nobody wants to do.
That's correct. And I worry about this generation because you hand a kid a screen at 1 or 2, they grow up feeling that that's normal. And I remember growing up and being, I was outside constantly. I'm 50 years old. And I remember on Saturdays we'd stay in and watch cartoons. And I remember by 10 o'clock, I would feel like absolute trash. Why do I feel so terrible? Let's go outside. And I feel so much better. What do you do when the kid's like, he doesn't know any better than feeling like trash? Like, he's been glued to that screen. That's his new normal now. And then that indoor sedentary lifestyle is basically destroying his entire biology. But he doesn't know any different. At least I knew back then that, hey, this didn't feel good. This isn't right. But if you don't know any other, if you don't
have the contrasts.
Yeah, like if 0 is your starting point, like what like, oh, how do I get back to zero? Zero sucks, but I'm at -10. Well, I'm back at zero. It's still bad. It still sucks because I've never experienced anything other than zero.
Mm-hmm.
So it's wild times we live in, man.
It's pretty crazy, Jim. It's been an absolute pleasure having you back on. It's been a long time since we had our first episode,
Yeah.
and it's been in the making for a while. Tell us a little bit more about the group coaching that you do,
Sure.
and who you're helping nowadays, in addition to
Well,
the high level athletes that you're working with.
yeah. So I basically have two groups. I have a Vitality Brotherhood, Vitality Sisterhood. Um, Basically, both of them attract over 40 people that are usually frustrated because they've tried everything and they're not in a good place. They're usually hardworking people. We're usually able to steer them in the right direction. I have women's group coaching, men's group coaching, and generally it's hard charging people that basically burned themselves out essentially. And it's like, okay, we need to, usually it's dialing back their exercise, figuring out what they need to do, working on the 5 fundamental habits. And essentially what I do is accountability. I'm not offering any kind of magical fixes. Like I was telling you before the call, I had a guy who was actually the carnivore diet was making his diabetes worse because he didn't have a gallbladder.
Mm.
So like, drawing on my experience of like, okay, you don't have a gallbladder, you probably need to be on like a lower fat diet, and we need to add some digestive support and you need to get outside because the guy was inside in front of a screen from 8 in the morning till 6 at night. So I'm obviously not a medical doctor, but I get a lot of people with really complex, autoimmune diseases and all these things that come in and they're not doing the fundamentals. And then all of a sudden they start doing the fundamentals and I help them stay accountable and we start where they are. A lot of times it's like, okay, we need to like shut off that high stress, high tone strategy you're stuck in. And we give them things that actually get them going in the right direction. They're not very sexy. They're not very exciting. And they actually do them for a period of time and they get better, and then we add the next layer on. So a lot of it is helping people kind of get rid of the overwhelm, simplify, and really introduce a lot of these 5 fundamental habits. I know I'm not going to be driving a Bugatti anytime soon. Um, but I really and sincerely, want to help people based on, my 30 years of coaching experience combined with destroying my health in numerous ways from self-destruction to car accidents to, high performance sports, fighting, wrestling, head injuries, motorcycle accidents, all the things that I've been through have taught me, how to unmess yourself up. So, that's basically what I do. So I'd love to see you in one of the groups. They're free. And of course you can go to Vitality Brotherhood. The Vitality Brotherhood link, has sisterhood links on it as well. And of course, if you want to talk to me about what you got going on, I'd love to help you. You can go to the recommended products page at the top and you can click on there and book a call with me. And I'd be happy to chat with you and see where you're at and see what I can do to get you going in the right direction.
No, that's awesome, Jim. I'll put those links in the description for people to get in touch with you and follow you on the different social media platforms as well. Again, thanks for coming on and sharing all this. It's always a pleasure talking to you, man.
Yeah, thank you as well. Have yourself a great day.
Take care. Before I let you go, I want to tell you a little bit more about this podcast sponsor. All You Need Nutrition is a high-quality supplement brand proudly made in France. When they first reached out to me, my wife, who's a trained nutritionist, had a lot of questions about the different ingredients that they use. So we scheduled a call with Miriam, the mastermind behind the entire All You Need product line. After the call that lasted almost 2 hours, my wife was really impressed by their transparency and the quality of their products. She was excited to work with a brand like All You Need. And if my wife says yes to a supplement brand, I'm on board without hesitation. Personally, I love their whey protein. I use it after every strength session or mix it in with my yogurt in the morning when I want a little extra protein. It's not too sweet, the cocoa flavor is delicious, and it blends really well. Their one product is fantastic if you're looking for a light energy boost plus all the vitamins and minerals you might need if you're used to training hard. My wife sticks to 1 scoop, but I go for 2. Make sure you find the dose that works for you. And special shout out to their shaker bottle. It's literally the best shaker I've used in the past 15 years. We've been using their supplements for the last 2 months and we're genuinely thrilled to be working with them. If you want to support the podcast, click the link in the description to check out their whole product line and use the code UPSIDE for 10% off on your next order with All You Need Nutrition. Take care and see you in the next episode.